Content is everything. Because we are, at the end of the day, the way I define ourselves is we are a content company. And in a line, if we were to say what is our mission at Wycom 18, and it applies to all our businesses, all our channels and everything, is to try and take every story to its audience and every audience to its story. So for us, story, as in content, and audience are critical, and therefore content is very, very central. And the way we look at, and what we've therefore been doing is we've been dialing up our efforts on content. Now, when I say dialing up our efforts on content, I want to sort of give it a bit of a dimension and give it context. So what I mean by that is the number of the original hours which we've been doing. So, if you were to go 6 years back, we would do about 2,000 hours of original content. Today, we do about 15,000 hours of original content. So we've dialed it up from quantity point of view. The other way we've dialed it up is from the number of languages. Again, if you go 5-6 years back, we were in Hindi predominantly, and now we sort of operate in 7 Indian languages. So I think number of languages in which we are doing content. The third thing which we've done is basically content for different screens. So I think if you look at it, earlier we were largely on television. And therefore, we were doing content for this screen, which is the TV screen. Yeah. We've started doing content for film screens, and we will talk about films as we go forward in our conversation. But more recently, we've started doing content for digital, the small screen as well. And so I think content is at the heart of everything which we do. The good news about India market is that Indian television market has got a lot of growth potential left in it. And therefore, there's a considerable runway. The reason I say that is because if you look at India, and I want to take a macro picture, so if you look at, there are close to about 300 million homes back home in India, Raj. And today, the number of TV homes are just under 200 million. 197 million is the number from Broadcast India, the last BARC survey. So there are close to about 100 million homes that don't have television. And I know there are quite a few poor Indians, but they're not going to remain poor forever. And I think they will. And TV is the first gadget which comes into a home the moment any household acquires a gadget. So number of TV homes will go up. So we'll add about 70 million minimum, maybe even 100 million, inshallah. So between 90 to 100% penetration. So there is 70 million homes, even if you take 90% penetration. The second interesting thing in India is that our average viewership, Raj, is lower compared to most parts of the world, and even compared to, let's say, parts of Asia, Southeast Asia, even if I don't compare to the Western world, where historically TV viewership has been very high, at least in the past. If you look at our average viewership, if you break it up into two components, our metro urban viewership is pretty good. It's about 4 hours, 20 minutes, 4 hours, 30 minutes. Whereas our rural viewership or small town viewership is lower. And my point of view is that, as my hypothesis is, which is reasonable, is that the power situation in India is still not, we don't have 24/7 power in most parts of the country. And that's why the TV viewership is lower in smaller towns and rural. So the number of hours of viewership will also go up. So the good news for television is more viewers, which is more TV homes, and more viewership. So I think that is really good. Compared to UK now, I think the market per se, in terms of number of homes, is fully saturated. Everybody owns a television set here, and therefore here, with digital growing, I think the pressure is beginning to come directly onto television. In India, that is happening in very, very small segments, but there is still a lot of runway. So the growth potential is extremely high. We had the free, some kind of a free model and the pay model which was operating. And I think that had found a certain kind of rhythm. With the change which has happened in UK, I think some of the channels will be under pressure, as you rightly said, Raj. And I think that will create its own dynamics. And as you rightly pointed out, there are some channels which will come under pressure. As far as we are concerned, we've got to find a model where we try and give content which is slightly more relevant to UK. I think the thinking we are trying to bring is, we want to do content we want to do content at two broad levels. A content which is relevant to the older Indian diaspora in UK, which we are doing to some extent. The second kind of content which we want to do is content which is relevant to the more younger, diaspora in UK. And that content could be done on both. So now, as you know, we've also introduced Voot. So I think whether we do it on television or on Voot, or at times in interaction with the two, I think is something which we need to do as we are thinking about UK. So we've done three things for UK, if you look at from our UK thinking. I think one is we've strengthened our portfolio. So from just having one colors, we've gone into colors and Rishte, then we've done colors HD we didn't have a high definition, whereas we do a very, very good quality, some of the programming which we've done. So that's a piece which we've done. Here we need to strengthen some of our programming, and as you talked about local and some of the piece which we are doing is the second piece. We've also done movies, Raj, as you saw, basically that's the movie channel, and you will see us doing a lot more in that space. So that's the other piece. We've also attempted with music, and I think that's an area we need to work on. So we are building the portfolio, we are strengthening content, whether it's local content, and also looking at content which could be relevant to the younger diaspora and maybe go beyond diaspora. We've also introduced Voot in UK, as you are aware, yes. Through Virgin. So some of the programming which we do, Raj, I think in the initial phase is done with India first, in my opinion, because that's a large market. And some of those things are doing exceedingly well in India at the moment. So, and this is a question which we keep asking. But there is a content pipeline which we are preparing now. And that content pipeline, so we are broadening our content pipeline. As we broaden our content pipeline in India, and there is work happening in that space as well, we are going to be able to then see if some of the content which appeals very well in India does not have the same set of appeal in UK. Do we either play that with the FPC or not play it at all are the options which we will have for ourselves, because we are building a more robust pipeline. And what I mean by that pipeline is that if I need, let's say, 100 hours of content, what we are developing is maybe 120 to 130 hours of content. And that additional content which we are developing, which then gives us the flexibility of being able to play it in different countries, and that's the way we are trying to. Very soon, we will also be available on the global, stores, whether it is the iOS store or the Google, Google Play, Google Store, so Android stores. I think that will happen very soon. So it's just round the corner, as I can tell you that. I think from the point of view of our partnership with Virgin, that's a first step, and we will evaluate as we go forward whether we need to do further partnerships. So we'll definitely be available on the stores very quickly, very soon. We are the Virgin piece you've already seen, and whether we need to do some more partnerships is something which I think we will follow a hybrid model, or basically both models. So what you currently see in India is basically an advertising funded AWOD model, and that's been quite successful. Yeah. But what we are doing are two things. We are basically launching a behind the paywall dedicated and segmented kids service called Voot Kids. Interestingly, Voot Kids will go well beyond video and watch. So therefore, that product is basically has watch, read, listen, and learn. So therefore, we've aggregated books there basically. So therefore, it's so therefore there's that section. There's a concept of audio stories and rhymes, nursery rhymes. That's a listen piece, and we've then incorporated, particularly for preschool children at the moment in stage 1. A lot of learning a little bit. So this is like, fun learning. So I think, so whatever you've seen, so it's about colors, it's about alphabet, it's a few spellings and so on and so forth. And in all of this, there is a parental control as well, Raj. So if you want to know what your child has done at a frequency at which you want to know, starting from a daily frequency to a weekly frequency, whatever, you would know how the screen time has been used. Right. Because the insight we have is that most parents think that screen time is junk time for their children, and may not be entirely incorrect. So therefore, what we are basically saying is that let screen time count. So basically, it's good for your child, fun for your child. And we're trying to achieve that balance. That's the insight we're trying to work on. So that's a kids piece which is happening, which will be behind paywall. That's going to be behind paywall in India. And as we take it out, it will be behind paywall. The third piece which we are doing is a model in India called freemium model, which I think the other players have already done. You're aware of it. So what happens is you enter free, but after a point in time, for certain additional content or experience. So it could be ad-free, it could be more linear services. So for both experiences and for additional content, you pay. So you enter free, but thereafter you pay. So that service also will launch by middle of the year. So I think that's the other piece which will happen. So this is the India thing. As we go abroad, we will see market to market. If you look at many markets in the world, particularly the Western world, a lot of the services are pay services. They tend to be largely pay. The ad-driven models are not very well established in some parts of the world. And therefore, where they are pay services, we will be offering something behind paywall. Our pricing may be more mild compared to some of the more mainstream products for that market. and has to be by definition, but it will be behind paywall. And if there are other markets where we can offer an ad-driven model as well, we'll do an ad-driven model. There are certain times we will do partnerships, and in partnerships we will see if there is a mix of the two. Sports is a big driver in terms of being able to get subscription. But I think my view is that as we start doing quality in originals and more content in entertainment as well, if we start building some amount of interactivity, which we do between, this is what I've been thinking, between television and between the two screens, I think we should be able to do it. See, sports is a big driver, I agree with you. But the thing, Raj, is that sports is also available for a limited period of the full year. You see, so for instance, irrespective of the calendar, so therefore usually it'll be a tight 3-month calendar. So if you look at cricket in India for the moment, it starts now around March and then will continue till about June, July. So it's for those 3-4 months, it's a very, very strong calendar. But thereafter, it's lean, there is nothing. Whereas if we get entertainment and past parts of series and all that right, our ability to engage the audience through the year is higher. Having said that, is sports something which we should look at and is something which we need to explore in the future? The answer is yes, we should keep looking at it. Do we have a slight disadvantage or a disadvantage compared to some of the others? The answer is yes, absolutely.
Okay, reality TV shows. We know that Bigg Boss will be a great pull when it comes to Voot,
yes.
Especially with behind the scenes and maybe extra bits. We missed it last time around because I think you were about to launch around November time.
Yes.
But things got delayed. So this year, I'm sure that's going to be a big thing, and not just to Bigg Boss, but other reality TV shows, which Khatro Ke Khiladi has been done incredibly well. So shows like that, will that also get extra picks and behind the scenes on Voot?
They do. They will definitely. Okay. Because so if you look at our current Voot viewership in India, to just give you an example, we do a lot of behind the scenes or content around content. We call that Voot exclusive is the term which we use for that, shoulder content. And that's done very well for us. So if I was to, break up our, index 100 of consumption on Voot, Raj, 60 of the 100 is catch-up TV on Voot. About 20%, to your point, around 20% of consumption, between 15 to 20, it varies, is all content around content, exclusives. And about 8 to 10% is kids content, and balance 8 or 10 to 12% is originals. So I think that's the mix which we have on Voot. So therefore for us, as we bring it here and as the season comes, and unfortunately now, depending on the different language speaking diaspora, we run 3 or 4 Bigg Bosses. So there's a Bigg Boss in Kannada, there's a Bigg Boss in Hindi, there's a Bigg Boss in Marathi. And so therefore there is, so that Big Brother itself happens in 3 or 4 languages. Yeah. And then we are basically, then we have Fear Factor, Khatro Ke Khiladi, as you rightly pointed out, and Rising Star, which has got, a reasonable amount of interactivity built in as well. And we got to see how some of that can play out here. So I think that's the piece which is, so therefore we are very strong on Voot exclusives and driving interactivity.